The New York City night was particularly bustling that August Friday. The lights of Fifth Avenue glittered in the distance, but it was on the Upper East Side that the true gastronomic spectacle of the city's elite was taking place. The restaurant, Essence, occupied the top of a restored historic building with a panoramic view of the city that never sleeps. With 3 Michelin stars and a waiting list that stretched for 6 months, it was the place where the powerful, sealed multi-million-dollar deals between glasses of French wine and dishes created by an award-winning Catalan chef, Emilia Clarke, adjusted the impeccable black apron over the starched white dress that made up the house uniform. Her brown hair was pulled back into a perfect bun, and her green eyes reflected a tranquility that contrasted with the bustle of the kitchen in the background. At 28, she was one of the most requested waitresses at Essence, known for her elegant posture and attention to detail. What no one there knew was that the woman who served tables with such grace carried a story on her shoulders far different from the one she presented. The 9 o'clock reservation was a special one. The manager, a nervous Italian named Marco, had gathered the entire team earlier to give precise instructions. A Middle Eastern businessman, owner of one of the largest oil fortunes in the Persian Gulf, would be dining there with his partners to close an infrastructure investment deal in the United States. The estimated value of the deal exceeded $100 million. Marco emphasized that everything had to be perfect, flawless, memorable. When the clock struck 9, the private elevator doors opened. Khalil al-Rashid entered the dining room as if taking possession of a conquered territory. Tall, around 45 years. Old, he wore an Italian suit that cost more than many Americans would earn in a year. His dark eyes scanned the room with the arrogance of someone accustomed to being the richest man in any room he entered. Behind him, 3 men followed, 2 younger Arabs who looked like aides, and a grey-haired German whom Emilia recognized as Heinrich Müller, a European investor with extensive business in the Middle East. Marco practically ran to them, bowing in exaggerated reverence. Emilia watched the scene from a distance, waiting for the signal to approach. She knew this type of client well. In the last 2 years serving at Essence, she had learned to identify the patterns, the gestures, the silent hierarchies established between the powerful and everyone else. Khalil was led to the best table near the glass windows that offered a breathtaking view of the illuminated city. Before even sitting down, he was already on the phone, speaking loudly in Arabic, completely ignoring Marco, who was trying to present the evening's tasting menu. His gestures were expansive, his voice dominated the space, and he seemed completely oblivious to the fact that other people were dining there. Emilia received the nod. From Marco. It was her turn. She took a deep breath, picked up the tablet with the digital menu, and walked towards the table with the posture she had learned in the restaurant's training. Every step was measured, every movement conveyed professionalism. Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to Essence. My name is Emilia, and I'll have the pleasure of serving you tonight. May I start by offering you something to drink while you review the menu? Khalil didn't even look at her. He continued talking on the phone, laughing loudly at something his caller had said. The 2 Arab aides exchanged glances, visibly embarrassed. Heinrich, the German, gave Emilia a polite nod, as if apologizing for the host's behavior. Emilia waited. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15. The phone conversation showed no signs of ending. She could feel the stares of other waiters, of Marco in the background, all waiting to see how she would handle the situation. Finally, with the delicacy of someone who doesn't want to interrupt but needs to do her job, she took a step forward. Excuse me, sir. When you're ready, I'll be happy to take your drink order. It was then that Khalil hung up the phone, but he didn't look at Emilia. Instead, he turned to his partners and, in classical Arabic, with a scornful smile on his lips, began to speak. His voice was loud enough for Emilia to hear every word perfectly. These American women are as beautiful as they are empty. Look at her. She probably couldn't even locate Dubai on a map, much less understand when she should be quiet and just serve. They are trained to smile and look elegant, but inside there is nothing but futility. That's why I prefer to do business only with men who understand the real value of things. One of the aides tried to stifle a laugh. The other lowered his eyes, clearly uncomfortable. Heinrich frowned, his expression showing disapproval, but he said nothing. And Khalil continued, now gesturing towards Amelia, as if she were a decorative object. These Western waitresses think a starched uniform and a smile make them our equals. They don't realize that there are useful people and invisible people in this world. She belongs to the second category. She exists only to serve and then disappear. Amelia remained still, the tablet still in her hands. Her face showed no emotion. There was no anger, no hurt, no surprise. Just a deep serenity that came from a place Khalil al-Rashid could never imagine. Because what that arrogant billionaire didn't know, what he couldn't even suspect as he belittled her in his own language, was that Amelia Clark understood every word he had said. Every insult, every slight, every syllable laden with contempt had reached her ears with perfect clarity. Amelia's heart beat faster, not from nervousness, but from a decision crystallizing within her. For 2 years she had swallowed silent humiliations. For 2 years she had smiled at customers who treated her like furniture. For 2 years she had accepted her place in that world of stark inequalities because she needed the money, because her mother depended on her, because the bills wouldn't pay themselves. But something about this moment was different. Maybe it was Khalil's absolute arrogance. Maybe it was the accumulated fatigue of months serving people who saw her as invisible. Maybe it was simply the fact that she had spent too much time hiding who she really was. Amelia took a step forward. Her voice, when it emerged, was as smooth as silk but carried the weight of years of study, of dedication, of a life built on knowledge and respect for different cultures. And it was in classical Arabic, with a perfect accent that rivaled his own, that she replied, "I thank you for the compliments on my intelligence, Mr. Al-Rashid. It's reassuring to know that men of your standing have such well-founded opinions about people they have just met." The effect was instantaneous. Khalil froze, his tanned face turning a pale shade in a matter of seconds. The 2 aides' eyes widened, their mouths falling open in silent shock. Heinrich, the German, let out a short, stifled laugh, his eyes twinkling with something that looked like approval. Amelia continued, her voice maintaining the same polite tone, but now with an edge of steel cutting through her words. "I must correct you on one point. I spent 4 years studying at the American University in Dubai, where I specialized in Middle Eastern cultures and languages. My classical Arabic was refined by professors who also educated members of royal families. As for the Gulf dialects, I can converse in any of them with the same fluency as a native." The silence that fell over the table was so thick that Amelia could hear the chatter from the other tables around them. Khalil al-Rashid was completely motionless, his eyes fixed on her as if he were seeing a ghost. Heinrich Müller couldn't contain a broad smile, and one of the Arab aides murmured something under his breath that sounded like a prayer. Amelia knew she had crossed a line. She knew she could be fired on the spot. Marco was probably already watching the scene from afar, trying to decipher what was happening. But something inside her refused to back down, not after years of building an expertise that was now being wasted serving tables, not after having sacrificed so much to master a culture that this man thought she didn't even know existed. She continued, now quoting an old Arabic proverb, her perfect pronunciation making each word resonate with authority. As the old desert saying goes, material wealth can buy palaces, but it can never buy character. A truly rich man is one who enriches the lives of others, not one who diminishes them. Heinrich clapped slowly, 3 times, his German accent thick with admiration when he finally spoke. "Extraordinary. Mr. Al-Rashid, her accent is flawless. I lived in Abu Dhabi for 5 years and have rarely heard a non-native speak classical Arabic with such precision." One of the aides, the younger one, dared to nod in agreement. Khalil remained mute, his face now a mixture of shock and something that might have been shame, though he clearly struggled not to show it. Amelia took a deep breath. Adrenaline was coursing through her veins, but she maintained control. When she spoke again, it was in Arabic, but her tone had changed. There was no more provocation, just a serene dignity that came from a deep place. "Mr. Al-Rashid, I will serve you tonight with all the excellence this restaurant represents. Not because I need your approval or recognition, but because I take pride in my work, regardless of who is sitting in front of me. The quality of my service does not depend on whether the customers have the basic decency to treat other human beings with respect. Then, with a smooth transition that demonstrated her linguistic mastery, she switched back to English, her tone professional and courteous. "Now, gentlemen, may I offer you something to drink? We have an exceptional selection of wines that pair perfectly with this evening's tasting menu." Heinrich was the first to react, ordering a specific red wine with a smile on his lips. The aides followed his lead, their voices low and respectful. Khalil still hadn't moved, his eyes still fixed on Amelia, but he finally mumbled something that sounded like a request for mineral water. Amelia noted everything precisely, bowed slightly in a polite curtsy, and walked away from the table. Her steps were firm, her posture erect. Only when she reached the service area, away from the customers' gazes, did she allow her hands to tremble slightly. "What did you do over there?" Marco appeared at her side, his eyes wide. "I saw that man's expression change completely. What happened?" Amelia smiled, a tired but genuine smile. "I just did my job, Marco. I'm going to get their drinks now." She offered no further explanation. Not at that moment. There were orders to process, drinks to serve, a whole night ahead. But something had changed. A door that had been locked inside her for 2 long years had swung open, and Amelia knew she wouldn't be able to close it again. The dinner proceeded in a tense silence at that particular table. Amelia served each course with impeccable professionalism, explaining the ingredients, the preparation techniques, the flavor combinations. She spoke in English, maintaining the appropriate professional distance. Khalil barely touched his food. His eyes followed her every time she approached, but he didn't say a single word throughout the meal. Heinrich, on the other hand, seemed to be enjoying himself immensely. With each dish served, he asked Amelia questions, and when she mentioned having studied in Dubai, he wanted to know more. It was a brief professional conversation, but Amelia noticed the gleam of genuine respect in the German's eyes. The other tables in the restaurant continued their normal rhythm. Businessmen discussed mergers and acquisitions, couples celebrated anniversaries, foreign tourists photographed every dish that arrived. But Amelia felt that something fundamental had shifted that night. It was as if a version of herself that had been dormant had awakened and now refused to go back to sleep. When dessert was served, an elaborate construction of chocolate and red berries that was the chef's signature, Amelia also brought the bill. Khalil took it without looking at the amount, inserted his black card into the machine, and authorized the payment. Then, to Amelia's surprise, he left 5 $100 bills on the table. A $500 tip, more than she earned in a whole week of work. But he said nothing. He didn't look at her. He simply stood up, his aides immediately following. Heinrich lingered for a moment, approaching Amelia discreetly. "You taught him a lesson worth more than any MBA," he said in a low voice, in English. "Men like him rarely encounter someone who puts them in their place. I hope you find a position that does justice to your talents. This restaurant is wasting a precious resource." And then he, too, was gone, leaving Amelia alone with those dollar bills on the table. She picked them up, feeling the weight of the paper in her hands. $500. Money that could pay the overdue bills, buy her mother's medication, give her some breathing room in her tight budget. But as she looked at those bills, something inside her revolted. She knew this kind of tip. It wasn't generosity. It was guilt. It was a rich man's attempt to buy her silence, to turn her humiliation into a commercial transaction. It was the money powerful people threw at problems to make them disappear. Amelia put the bills in her apron pocket and finished her shift. It was almost 2 in the morning when she finally changed in the staff locker room. The impeccable uniform was replaced by jeans and a simple blouse. She grabbed her bag, waved to the colleague still cleaning the dining room, and went down to the building's ground floor. That's when she saw the car. A black limousine was parked in front of the restaurant, and standing beside it, smoking a cigar, was Khalil al-Rashid. He saw her at the same moment. He threw the cigar on the ground, stubbed it out with his Italian shoe, and walked towards her. Amelia felt her heart race, but she held her ground. Khalil stopped a few feet away, Under the light of the street lamps, he looked different, smaller somehow. The arrogance had been replaced by something she couldn't quite decipher. "Are you waiting for me, Mr. Al-Rashid?" Amelia asked in English, her voice neutral. He hesitated, then replied, his voice hoarse. "I need to speak with you." Amelia crossed her arms. "It's 2 in the morning, I'm tired, and I have to take 2 buses to get home. If you have something to say, please be brief." Khalil took another step forward. There was something in his eyes Amelia hadn't seen before, something that might have been remorse. "What I said today was unforgivable. I treated you as if you were invisible, less than human, and you showed me that I am the ignorant one, not you." Amelia didn't reply immediately. She watched him, this man who had built an empire on oil, who moved billions, who had probably never been confronted this way in his entire life. "Your humiliation of me was public," Khalil continued, "and it was just. But I cannot simply walk away without trying to make it right." Amelia took the dollar bills from her pocket and held them out to him. "Then start by taking this back." Khalil looked at the money, confused. "It's a tip. You earned it." "I don't want your guilt money," Amelia replied, her voice firm. "If you truly want to correct what you did, learn this lesson. All human beings deserve respect, regardless of the uniform they wear or the job they do. The greatest ignorance isn't not knowing a language or a culture. It's not knowing how to treat people with basic dignity." Khalil took the money back, his hands trembling slightly. Amelia realized with surprise that this man who commanded an empire was visibly shaken. She had seen powerful people before, had served politicians, celebrities, world-renowned entrepreneurs, but she had never seen one of them so genuinely disconcerted. "You're right," he said finally, putting the bills in his pocket. "Everything I said was a projection of my own insecurity. I divide the world into useful and invisible people because it's easier than acknowledging the humanity in everyone who crosses my path." Amelia hadn't expected that confession. She had expected anger, perhaps more arrogance, possibly a veiled threat of lawsuits or trouble at work. But not this raw vulnerability. "Why is a woman with your education serving tables?" Khalil asked, and there was genuine curiosity in his voice. "You studied at one of the best universities in the Middle East. You speak Arabic like a native. What happened?" Amelia considered not answering, considered simply turning her back and going home, leaving this bizarre encounter behind. But something in his sincerity, in the way he waited for her answer without demanding anything, made her hesitate. "Life happened," she said finally. "I came back to the States full of plans, but the job market for specialists in Middle Eastern cultures isn't exactly vibrant in New York. I sent resumes to consulting firms, international trade companies, even embassies. But with no prior professional experience, no connections, the doors remained closed." She paused, looking at the illuminated city around them. "My mother got sick shortly after I returned. Her pension barely covered her medications. I had student loans, accumulated bills, overdue rent. Essence was hiring, it paid reasonably well with tips, and I needed to eat. Sometimes life doesn't follow the plans we make at graduation." Khalil was silent for a long moment. A taxi drove past, honking at someone further down the street. The night wind carried the smell of food from a nearby restaurant that was still open. "I'm going to offer you something," Khalil said at last. "And before you refuse, thinking it's charity or guilt, let me be clear. This is business, pure and simple business." Amelia watched him cautiously. "My company is expanding operations in the United States. We're investing in infrastructure, renewable energy, partnerships with local companies, but we constantly face intercultural communication problems. My Western executives don't understand the nuances of the Arab world. My Arab executives stumble over American sensibilities. We lose deals over misunderstandings that could be avoided." He took a step forward, his eyes meeting hers. "I need someone who understands both worlds, someone who can bridge the gap between different cultures, who can train my teams, who can warn me when I'm about to make a monumental mistake, like the one I made tonight. I am offering you a position as Cultural Relations Manager at my company, a salary of $20,000 a month, full benefits, And the opportunity to use everything you've studied. Amelia felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. $20,000 a month. She currently made that in 4 months, serving tables, if she was lucky with tips. "That's absurd," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You don't know me. You don't know if I'm competent, if I'm trustworthy, if I can really do what you're describing." "I know you master classical Arabic and Gulf dialects perfectly," Khalil replied. "I know you studied for 4 years at a prestigious university. I know you had the courage to confront me publicly when I disrespected you, something men in my circle rarely do. And I know you refused $500 because your principles are worth more than easy money. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." Amelia shook her head, trying to process it all. "I need to think about it. I need time." "You have 48 hours, Khalil said, taking a business card from his pocket. "This is my direct line. When you decide, call this number. If you accept, you can start on Monday. If you refuse, I will respect your decision and never bother you again." He placed the card in her hand, and before Amelia could respond, he bowed slightly, a gesture of respect. "Good night, Amelia Clark, and thank you for giving me the most valuable lesson I've received in years." Then he got into the limousine and drove away, leaving Amelia alone on the sidewalk, holding a business card that could completely change her life. The journey home was a blur. Amelia caught the first bus almost on autopilot, her mind spinning in circles. She sat by the window watching the city pass by outside, the streets gradually changing, from wealthy neighborhoods to simpler ones, as she moved away from the Upper East Side. $20,000 a month. It was more money than she had ever imagined earning. It was the difference between surviving and truly living. It was being able to afford better treatment for her mother, pay off her debts, maybe even save for the future. But accepting meant working for a man who had humiliated her just hours before. It meant trusting that his sudden transformation was genuine and not just a calculated move. It meant risking her dignity again. Amelia got off the second bus around 3 in the morning and walked the 2 blocks to the small apartment she shared with her mother. The building was old, with cracks in the exterior walls and faded paint. She slowly climbed the 3 flights of stairs, her feet aching after hours of standing at the restaurant. When she opened the door, she found her mother, Mrs. Eleanor Clark, still awake in the living room, watching a rerun of a soap opera on TV with the volume low. At 62, Eleanor Clark still maintained the upright posture she had cultivated in her years as an executive secretary before arthritis forced her into early retirement. "Honey, are you all right?" Eleanor asked immediately, noticing something different on Amelia's face. "Did something happen at work?" Amelia sat down next to her mother on the worn-out sofa, and then, for the first time since it had all happened, she felt the emotions she had suppressed begin to surface. "Mom," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "Something happened today, something that could change everything." And she told her. She told her about Khalil, about the insults, about her response in Arabic, about the confrontation on the street. She told her about the impossible job offer, about the salary that seemed surreal, about the decision she had to make in 48 hours. Eleanor listened to it all in silence, her arthritic hands holding Amelia's. When her daughter finished, she was quiet for a long moment, her wise eyes studying Amelia's face. "You're scared," she said finally. "Not that it's a trap or a trick. You're scared that it's real, and that you deserve it." Amelia felt tears burn her eyes. "I've spent 2 years believing that all those years of study were wasted, that I had made the wrong choices, followed the wrong path. I convinced myself that serving tables was all I could ever do." Eleanor squeezed her daughter's hands tightly. "My dear, you never wasted anything. Every hour you spent studying, every sacrifice you made, it all prepared you for this exact moment. That man isn't offering charity. He recognized your value even if it took a public humiliation to open his eyes. But what if he hasn't really changed? What if it's just wounded pride? What if he goes back to treating me that way?" "Then you leave," Eleanor said firmly. "You leave with your head held high, knowing you tried. But if you don't take this opportunity out of fear, you'll spend the rest of your life wondering what could have been." Amelia hugged her mother, smelling the familiar lavender scent Eleanor always wore. The next 48 hours were the longest of Amelia's life. She went to work on Saturday night as usual, serving tables with the same efficiency as before, but her mind was elsewhere. Marco pulled her aside during her break, curious about what had happened with the Arab billionaire. But Amelia was evasive, saying only that there had been a misunderstanding that was resolved. On Sunday, her day off, Amelia did what she always did when she needed to think clearly. She went to the New York Public Library on Fifth Avenue, that sanctuary of knowledge where she had spent countless hours in previous years, studying for civil service exams she never passed, reading about distant cultures, dreaming of a different life. She sat at her favorite table, near the windows overlooking the bustling avenue, and opened her old laptop. She researched the Al Rashid Energy Corporation. What she found was impressive and intimidating in equal measure. The company had operations in 17 countries and annual revenue exceeding $20 billion, and was indeed expanding aggressively into the American renewable energy market. There were articles about Khalil in international business magazines, descriptions of him as a ruthless visionary, a brutal negotiator, a man who had turned his father's inherited fortune into something 3 times larger through risky bets and flawless execution. But there were also mentions of labor lawsuits, criticism of working conditions in some of his operations, and accusations that he treated employees like disposable resources. Amelia closed the laptop, her decision still not made. She walked through the library, her fingers tracing the spines of books on Arab culture, linguistics, international relations. All of it represented years of her life, years of passion, dedication, and a genuine love for understanding worlds different from her own. She thought of her mother, taking expensive arthritis medication that consumed half of her meager pension. She thought of the late electricity bills, the rent that always threatened to become a problem. She thought of how many times she had eaten plain pasta for a whole week to save money. But she also thought about dignity, about self-respect, about not selling herself short. When the clock struck 5, on Sunday afternoon, she took out her cell phone and dialed the number from the card Khalil had given her. Her heart pounded as she waited for the call to connect. Amelia Clark. Khalil's voice sounded on the other end, surprisingly warm. "I was hoping you would call." Amelia took a deep breath. "I have one condition," she said, without preamble. "If you agree to it, I accept the position." Silence on the other end. Then, "I'm listening. If at any moment, for any reason, you treat me with anything less than the respect any human being deserves, if you diminish me, if you make me feel invisible like you did that night, I walk out immediately. No notice, no transition period. I just leave. This is the one non-negotiable condition." More silence. Amelia held her breath. Then she heard something she didn't expect. Khalil laughing. Not a laugh of scorn, but something genuine, almost relieved. "I accept your condition with one addition," he said. "I don't just accept that you will leave if I disrespect you. I insist that you do. And furthermore, I need you to confront me whenever you see me treating any employee the way I treated you. I need you to be my conscience because clearly my own isn't functioning properly." It was Amelia's turn to be silent, processing that unexpected response. "Then we have a deal," she said finally. "We have a deal. Can you start tomorrow, Monday? My office is in Midtown Manhattan. I'll send my driver to pick you up at 8 a.m. Give me your address." Amelia hesitated. The idea of a private driver picking her up in her humble neighborhood seemed absurd. But then she remembered her mother's words. No fear, no shame for who she was or where she came from. She gave him the address. That night, after resigning by phone to an incredulous Marco, who wavered between congratulations and lamenting the loss of his best waitress, Amelia could barely sleep. She stared at the ceiling of her small room, listening to her mother's steady breathing in the next room, trying to believe that this was all real. Monday arrived with a flawless blue sky. Amelia chose her only suit, bought years ago for job interviews that never panned out. It was black, simple but well-tailored. She put her hair up in a professional bun, applied discreet makeup, and at 8 o'clock sharp, went downstairs to find a black Mercedes waiting in front of the building. The driver, a middle-aged man named Joe, was American and extremely polite. During the drive across the city, He mentioned that he had been working for Al-Rashid for 3 months, and that Mr. Al-Rashid was really trying to change his management style. He even apologized to me last week, Joe said, still sounding surprised, for being rude when I got lost on the way to a meeting. Said he was stressed and that it was no excuse to take it out on me. Indeed, 20 years of driving for executives, I've never seen anything like it. Amelia absorbed this information, feeling a small seed of hope grow. Maybe the change was real. Maybe that night at the restaurant had truly been a turning point. The Al-Rashid Energy Corporation office occupied 3 floors of a mirrored glass building in Midtown. The reception area was all white marble and dark wood, with employees moving with quiet efficiency. Amelia was greeted by an assistant named Jessica, who took her up to the 23rd floor. Khalil was waiting for her in a conference room with a panoramic view of New York City. He was wearing a navy blue suit, but today there was something different about his posture. Less arrogance, more uncertainty. "Amelia," he said, extending his hand, "welcome to the Al-Rashid Energy Corporation." She shook his hand, firm and professional. "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Al-Rashid." "Khalil," he corrected. "Here, you call me Khalil. Excessive formalities create barriers, and I need you to be direct with me." The first few days were a roller coaster of discovery. Amelia was introduced to the executive team, a mix of Americans, Arabs, and Europeans. Her role was explained. She would be responsible for training all employees in cultural sensitivity, reviewing important communications to ensure there were no intercultural misunderstandings, and advising Khalil directly on matters related to negotiations involving cultural differences. She was given her own office, small but elegant, with a partial view of the city, a state-of-the-art computer, a direct line phone, and a salary that was deposited into her account in advance so she could get settled. The first thing Amelia did with the money was take her mother to a private specialist for her arthritis. The treatment he recommended was expensive, but now she could afford it. Seeing the relief on Eleanor's face as the pain subsided for the first time in years was worth every second of uncertainty Amelia had felt. At work, she dove in head first. She created an intercultural training program that started with the top executives and would gradually expand to the entire company. She reviewed contracts and business proposals, finding and correcting linguistic nuances that could have caused problems. And she watched Khalil closely. The man was genuinely trying to change. She saw him apologize to a secretary he had interrupted during a call. She saw him ask for the opinions of junior employees in strategic meetings. She saw him implement an open-door policy where any employee could schedule a time to speak with him directly. But she also saw the moments when the old Khalil threatened to resurface, the impatience when something didn't go as planned, the harsh tone when someone made a mistake, the tendency to dominate conversations without leaving room for others. And whenever she saw it, Amelia intervened, sometimes with a meaningful look during a meeting, sometimes with a private conversation afterward, sometimes by simply touching his arm and shaking her head. To her surprise, Khalil accepted these interventions. More than that, he seemed to value them. 3 months passed in a whirlwind. Amelia settled completely into her new role, quickly becoming indispensable to the company's operations. Her cultural training sessions were eagerly awaited by employees who appreciated her practical approach filled with real-life examples. She mediated delicate negotiations with partners from the Persian Gulf, averted 3 potential diplomatic disasters, and even suggested modifications to contracts that saved the company millions of dollars. But something else was happening, something Amelia initially tried to ignore. Khalil began to seek her out for conversations that went beyond the professional. It started with questions about Arab culture over lunch. It then evolved into discussions about literature, philosophy, and the differences and similarities between Eastern and Western thought. He lent her books by classical Arab poets, asking for her interpretations. She recommended American authors to him, and was surprised when he actually read them and came back with insightful comments. Amelia realized she was getting to know a very different Khalil from the arrogant billionaire of that first night. This Khalil was curious, inquisitive, surprisingly vulnerable when he spoke about the pressures of managing a business empire inherited at 23 after his father's sudden passing. This Khalil admitted his flaws, his fears, his regrets, and Amelia, despite all her caution, despite all the mental alarms she set off, began to feel something she shouldn't feel. It wasn't just professional respect. It wasn't just admiration for his ability to change. It was something deeper, more dangerous. One evening, working late on an important proposal for a solar energy consortium, Khalil entered her office with 2 cups of Arabic coffee that he had prepared himself. "I thought you might need this," he said, placing a cup on her desk. Real Arabic coffee, not that watered-down version they serve in the cafeteria. Amelia accepted the cup, inhaling the rich aroma spiced with cardamom. "You've learned to make Arabic coffee correctly," she observed, impressed. "Most men of your generation leave that to the women of the family or to servants." Khalil sat in the chair across from her desk, a sad smile on his lips. "My grandmother taught me when I was 10. She said a man who doesn't know how to make his own coffee is a man who will always depend on others for basic things. I forgot that lesson for many years until you reminded me." They sat in silence for a moment, drinking coffee and looking out at the illuminated city through the window. "Amelia," Khalil said finally, his voice more serious, "may I ask you a personal question?" She nodded, cautious. "Why have you never married? A woman with your intelligence, your beauty, your strength of character. Surely there was no shortage of suitors." Amelia laughed, but it was a humorless laugh. "When you spend 4 years in the Middle East studying, focused solely on mastering a culture, there isn't much time left for relationships. And when I came back to the States, I was so busy trying to survive that romance was the last thing on my priority list." She paused, then decided to be honest. "And maybe because I never found someone who truly saw me, who looked beyond the surface and recognized the value of what's inside." Khalil watched her for a long moment, his dark eyes intense. "I see you, Amelia. And I don't just see. I deeply admire who you are." The air in the office seemed to grow thicker. Amelia felt her heart race, but she forced herself to maintain a professional composure. "Mr. Al-Rashid, Khalil, we need to maintain appropriate boundaries. We are colleagues." Khalil nodded slowly, but he didn't look away. "You're right. Forgive me if I overstepped. Good night, Amelia." He left, leaving her alone with her coffee and her turbulent thoughts. Amelia knew she was in dangerous territory. There was a fundamental power imbalance between them. He was her boss, a billionaire, someone who could destroy her career with a single word. Getting emotionally involved would be madness. But in the following days she realized she couldn't stop thinking about him, about the way he truly listened when she spoke, the way his eyes lit up when she explained some cultural nuance he didn't know, the genuine effort he made to be a better person. It was Heinrich Müller who finally forced the issue. The German investor visited the New York office for a strategic meeting and, at the end of the day, invited Amelia to dinner. They went to a discreet German restaurant in Greenwich Village. Heinrich ordered beer and schnitzel and got straight to the point as soon as the waiter walked away. "You and Khalil," he said bluntly. "There's something going on there and you two are fighting it like scared teenagers." Amelia felt her face flush. "Heinrich, that is completely inappropriate." "Nonsense," Heinrich interrupted, his voice gentle but firm. "I've known Khalil for 15 years. I've seen him build his empire with ruthless determination. I've seen him make decisions that changed entire industries, but never in all these years have I seen him look at someone the way he looks at you." Amelia took a sip of water, trying to buy time. "He's my boss. There's a fundamental power imbalance. It would be completely unethical." Heinrich shook his head. "It would be unethical if he were, using his position to coerce or manipulate you. But what I see is a man in love desperately trying to respect your boundaries, and a woman who is equally in love trying to convince herself that she isn't." Amelia didn't answer. She couldn't, because he was right. "Khalil changed because of you," Heinrich continued. "And I don't just mean his manners at the office. He's becoming the man he always could have been, but chose not to be out of fear or arrogance or who knows what. You awakened something in him that was dormant, That's a rare gift, Amelia. But what if it doesn't work out? Amelia heard herself ask. What if it's just a temporary infatuation and then everything falls apart? I would lose my job, my stability, everything. Heinrich smiled. Then you find another job. With your qualifications and the experience you're gaining here, companies would line up to hire you. But if you let fear dictate your choices, you'll spend the rest of your life wondering, what if? That night, lying in her bed in the now more comfortable apartment she had rented for herself and her mother, Amelia finally admitted the truth to herself. She was in love with Khalil al-Rashid, deeply, irrevocably in love. The question was what to do about it. 2 weeks later, during a business trip to Dubai, where Amelia accompanied Khalil to facilitate negotiations with local partners, everything changed. It was their last night before returning to the United States. The negotiations had been a resounding success, with a $200 million contract signed. Khalil invited Amelia to dinner at his favorite restaurant in the city, a discreet place that served traditional Gulf cuisine. They talked about everything but work, about childhood, dreams, fears. Khalil told her about the pressure of being the only son in a powerful family, about how he had never felt free to just be himself. Amelia shared her own struggles, about feeling like she never truly belonged anywhere, neither in the Arab world she had studied, nor in the America where she was born. When dessert arrived, Khalil fell silent for a long moment, looking at his hands clasped on the table. "Amelia," he said finally, his voice hoarse with emotion, "I need to say something, and I need you to just listen until the end before you answer." She nodded, her heart pounding. "I am in love. With you," Khalil said, the words rushing out. "And I know that complicates everything. I know I'm your boss, that there's a power imbalance, that you have every reason in the world to say no. But I needed you to know. You saved me from myself, Amelia. You saved me from becoming a man my own children would be afraid to disappoint instead of genuinely loving." He took a deep breath, his eyes meeting hers. "You taught me that human worth isn't measured in dollars or barrels of oil. That respect isn't something you give only to people at your social level. That being vulnerable isn't weakness but courage. You made me want to be a better man, not out of obligation, but because you deserve someone better than the man I was." Amelia felt tears burn her eyes, not tears of sadness, but of something far more complex. "Khalil, Wait," he interrupted gently. "Let me finish. If you don't feel the same, I completely understand and respect that. Our professional relationship will not change. You have my word. But if there is any chance, however small, that you might feel something for me, I want to explore it. Not as your boss, but as a man who has met an extraordinary woman and doesn't want to let her get away." Amelia wiped away the tears that had begun to fall. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Scared of the cultural differences, scared of what people will think, scared that this is just intensity and not real love, scared of losing everything I've built if it doesn't work out." She paused, then looked directly into his eyes. "But despite all that fear, I feel something for you too. Something I've tried to deny and suppress but couldn't. You're no longer the arrogant man who insulted me that night at the restaurant. You've transformed into someone I deeply respect. And somewhere along the way, without realizing when, that respect turned into something more." The smile that lit up Khalil's face was transformative. He reached across the table and took her hands in his. "Then let's take it slow," he said. "No pressure, no impossible expectations. Let's figure this out together, one day at a time." And that's what they did. The following months were challenging in ways neither of them had anticipated. When news of their relationship spread, there were reactions. Khalil's conservative family in Dubai was shocked. An American, not a Muslim, a working woman. His mother practically disowned him in a tumultuous phone call. His uncles questioned his judgment, saying he was being controlled by emotions and not reason. On Amelia's side, Eleanor had her own concerns. She had read stories about intercultural marriages that failed, about women who gave up their lives to move to the Middle East and then felt trapped. She feared for her daughter, even while acknowledging that Khalil seemed genuinely transformed. There were also the practical challenges. Khalil needed to travel constantly to Dubai, leaving Amelia alone in New York for weeks at a time. The cultural differences, which had seemed romantic and interesting at first, sometimes created misunderstandings. Khalil still struggled with certain conditionings from his upbringing about gender roles. Amelia sometimes felt suffocated by his intensity, but they worked through it. They talked honestly about every problem. They went to couples therapy with a therapist specializing in intercultural relationships. They established clear boundaries and expectations, and slowly, sometimes painfully, they built something solid. Amelia met Khalil's family on a tense trip to Dubai. She was received coldly by his mother, with curiosity by his sisters, and with suspicion by his uncles. But she was not intimidated. She spoke fluent Arabic with them, demonstrated a deep knowledge of their culture, but also proudly maintained her American identity. Gradually, especially Khalil's sisters, they began to respect her. Khalil, for his part, won over Eleanor with genuine gestures. He paid for an experimental arthritis treatment for her in the United States, but more importantly, he treated her with deep respect, asking for her blessing before proposing to Amelia, listening to her advice and including her in important decisions. 2 years after that first night at the restaurant, Khalil made a special reservation. Essence, the same restaurant where it had all begun, was rented out for an entire evening just for the two of them. Amelia arrived not knowing what to expect. When she entered the dining room, she found only one table set, the same table where Khalil had humiliated her and where she had defended herself with dignity. Khalil was waiting for her there, wearing an impeccable suit, but his eyes showed a vulnerability that was entirely new. "This table," he said as he led her to her seat, "is where I made one of the worst mistakes of my life. It's where I judged you without knowing you, where I diminished you based on nothing but stupid prejudice and arrogance. But it is also where you taught me the greatest lesson of my life." He walked around the table and, to Amelia's shock, knelt beside her. "Amelia Clark, you taught me that a person's true worth is not measured by the money in their bank account, but by the character in their heart. You transformed me from a man who divided the world into the useful and the invisible, into someone who finally understands that every person has inherent dignity." He took a small velvet box from his pocket. "Will you marry me? Not because I am rich, not because I can offer a comfortable life, but because I love who you are. Because I want to spend the rest of my life learning from you, growing with you, and building a better world by your side." Amelia looked at the ring, a green emerald surrounded by diamonds, the same color as her eyes. She looked at the man kneeling before her, so different from the arrogant billionaire who had insulted her in this very spot 2 years ago, and without hesitation she replied, "Yes, 1,000 times, yes." The wedding was a fusion of cultures, held in both the United States and Dubai, with ceremonies that respected both traditions. Khalil's family, especially his mother, finally accepted Amelia when they saw how much she had transformed him. Eleanor walked her daughter down the aisle, tears of joy in her eyes. 5 years after the wedding, Amelia and Khalil lived between two worlds. They spent 6 months a year in New York, 6 in Dubai. They had 2 children, Lucas and Layla, who were growing up bilingual and bicultural, learning to value both heritages. The Al Rashid Energy Corporation had been transformed under Amelia's influence. Khalil implemented revolutionary policies of respect and dignity in the workplace. Salaries were raised, working conditions improved, and professional development programs were created. The company maintained its profitability, but was now also known as one of the best places to work in the energy sector. Amelia had become Director of Cultural Relations, not just for Khalil's company, but a consultant for several other international corporations. She wrote a book on intercultural communication that became a benchmark in business schools. She gave lectures around the world on how true cultural understanding can transform not just businesses but lives. Every year, on the anniversary of that first meeting, they returned to Essence. The restaurant's management, knowing the story, had placed a discreet plaque on the table in English and Arabic, where arrogance met dignity and the world changed for 2 brave souls. On this particular anniversary, the 5th since the proposal, Amelia and Khalil sat at the table with their children. Lucas, 4, was fascinated by the plaque, tracing his little fingers over the Arabic letters he was learning to recognize. Layla, 3, was more interested in the bread roll she had been served. "Baba," Lucas asked in Arabic, his preferred language at the moment, "why is this table special?" Khalil looked at Amelia, a smile on his lips. She nodded, indicating that he should tell the story. "Because, my son," Khalil said, lifting Lucas onto his lap, "it was at this table that I learned the most important lesson of my life. I learned that no person is invisible, that everyone deserves respect, no matter what their job is or where they come from. And I learned this from the wisest woman I have ever known, your mother." Lucas looked at Amelia with wide eyes. "Is Mama everyone's teacher?" Amelia laughed, kissing her son's forehead. "Not everyone's, sweetie, but I try to teach what I can. And the most important lesson is the same one I teach you and your sister. Treat everyone with kindness and respect, because you never know someone's whole story just by looking at them." After the children were taken home by the nanny, Amelia and Khalil remained alone at the table, sipping wine and reminiscing. "Do you ever regret it?" Khalil asked suddenly. "Giving me a second chance?" Amelia took his hand across the table. "Never. You showed me that people can genuinely change when they find the right motivation, and you've given me a life I never imagined possible." She paused, her eyes shining. "But more importantly, you see me. You really see me. Not the waitress, not the cultural expert, not the billionaire's wife. Just Amelia. And you love me for who I am." Khalil raised her hand to his lips. "How could I not? You saved me from becoming an empty man, rich in money but poor in humanity. You gave me purpose beyond profits. You gave me a family that loves me for who I am, not what I possess. You gave me a life worth living." They raised their glasses in a toast, their clinking softly in the nearly empty room. Amelia's journey from underestimated waitress to respected executive, from invisible woman to beloved partner, had been long and challenging. But every obstacle, every difficulty, every moment of doubt had been worth it. Because in the end, she had proven something fundamental, that human value transcends job titles, bank accounts, or social origins, that a single brave act, a single moment of defended dignity can change not just one life but two, that true love knows no cultural boundaries when built on mutual respect and shared growth, and that sometimes life's greatest gifts come wrapped in the worst insults, just waiting for us to have enough courage to unwrap them. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Amelia and Khalil has touched your hearts deeply. This journey of transformation and true love reminds us that every person we meet carries a story we know nothing about, and that respect and dignity are gifts we should offer to everyone regardless of who they are. If this narrative resonated with you, be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next stories we have prepared with so much care. Click the like button if you believe, just like Amelia and Khalil, that people can change and that true love overcomes all barriers. We want to know in the comments, would you have given Khalil a second chance? What lesson from this story touched your heart the most? Share your thoughts with us. Every day we bring you unique stories that explore the complexity and beauty of human life. Until the next story, and remember, never underestimate the power of treating all people with dignity and respect.